This video is on storage of vegetables and how to keep them so that they last as long as possible, and so that they don't rot, and you can keep them through the winter as long as possible. Cabbage is not to be kept like this. They'll dry out and deteriorate quicker. This is how you keep cabbage. You wrap them in a couple layers of newspaper, each individually, and they keep much better. It seems to be this is the best way that we found the cabbage lasts. And so if you keep them out in the open or keep them in plastic bags, they will not last. So this is how we store our cabbage. For potatoes, we keep them in flats like this. Well, the top flat's weaker, but generally this is what we do for the flats. We put our potatoes in what they call the peach flats. We don't stack them too full. There's some space in there, but this is how we keep the potatoes. Keep them away from the onions. The onions, they'll cause accelerated deterioration, from what I understand, for the potatoes. So those two have to be separate. But this is what we, nice flat at the top. This is how we stack the potatoes and store them for the winter. So we have them in the garage. Most of our stuff's in the garage. The onions, cabbage, potatoes. So it's cooler, and so they'll keep fresher and last longer. You see there's plastic bags over top of the potatoes. I pulled them off, but we keep them totally covered so they don't turn green. The sun will make them turn green, so that's not a good scene. This is how we store our onions, are stored in these flats. Again, the peach flats seem to be the best because they're higher. They have a little space here, whereas grape flats are just flat and there's not enough air movement. So we do cutouts, but makes them a little bit weaker. Sometimes they collapse a little bit, but at least there's more air movement. So we do the cutouts here. And this is how the onions seem to keep best, again, in the garage where it's a little cooler for the winter. And they'll last all winter with the potatoes, and cabbage will go most of the winter as well. Here's one of our turnips. It is waxed, and they'll keep just like that without even being in a bag, as far as I understand. So we'll leave them again in the garage for the winter, and they'll last right through the spring, along with the onions and the potatoes, and so it seems to work well. This is the cooler we made, and we used an air conditioner, just a normal air conditioner for the cooler. It does reduce the humidity a little bit inside the cooler. With an industrial-sized air conditioner or an industrial-sized cooler, there's more of a humidity in the cooler, but this seems to work good. We just run it for a half hour on, 1 hour off. We put it on a timer, so the timer runs it for a half hour and then turns it off for an hour. You can go half hour on, half hour off, as long as your fins don't freeze up. But this is cycled through from 6 through till 11 at night, and then at night it's allowed to coast so that the fins can thaw out. But again, you don't need these fancy, expensive timers or controllers for $300. You just put it on a timer and just watch it, see how long the fins need to thaw out. So sometimes we'll just do a half hour on, half hour off. It depends what the humidity is outside in the garage. But this seems to work pretty good. It's just a normal house window air conditioner. Put it on a timer. This is the inside of the cooler. You can see the inside of the air conditioner. That door is insulated, and this is like a fruit cellar in here. Not really well insulated, but it works fine. You can see there's the night light. That tricks the sensor into thinking that it's warmer than what it is. So that the air conditioner will bring it down to around 1 degree Celsius. So it's fairly effective. We could probably just short out that sensor. I'm not sure we'll have to check it out instead of using the nightlight. But the nightlight doesn't take much power, it's just an LED. But that's how you trick the sensor into thinking that it's warm and that the air conditioner keeps running. Okay, this is the inside of the cooler. We're keeping apples in here and carrots, and there is some peppers here as well. The apples we keep in garbage bags because the air conditioner does reduce the humidity in the cooler a little bit and can dry the apples out. So that's why we keep them in garbage bags. But sometimes we pull the bags back because the humidity does build in. We do organic apples, and again the Fujis are the best for organic growing because the Fujis will last longer. They're a better apple for lasting longer through the winter, and the bugs don't bug them as much. So if you're going to go do organic growing of apples, grow Fuji, or maybe the Red Delicious might work. I'm not sure, we haven't tried them, but definitely Fuji's last quite a long time. Macs don't last that long, and Cortlands don't last that long, if they're raised organically. But you have to eat them up quickly if you have organic Cortlands or organic Macs. So you can see inside here the apples. Awesome Fuji apples. Not perfect because they're organic, but a whole lot healthier than the pesticide-laden apples that you eat in the stores. Just heard yesterday, 29 pesticides are in each person because of the pesticides sprayed in all our fruits and vegetables. So you see the box, we use banana boxes to store them in. And now, if the humidity goes down, I will take the bag and close them up a little more later on. But I check the bags once a week for humidity, and that's important. This seems to work good. So now for carrots. For carrots, we keep them in a 5-gallon pail. They're buried underneath the peppers here, but there's one carrot pail up here. We leave the lid kind of loose because humidity can build up in them. So we leave the head lid loose. And there's the carrots. We used to put them in sawdust. That just, it doesn't work. It changes the taste. So we just put the carrots in, pile them in. Make sure they're dry before you pile them in the pail. This year we washed them. Some of our neighbors, Midnight neighbors, washed them. So we're going to try it, see how they keep with them washed, if it's any better. Getting most of the dirt off them. But last year they kept okay with the dirt on them. So that's what we're going to try this year. And again, the lid goes on lightly. Here's our peppers. That little thing is our temperature controller. It's a remote temperature controller. It tells us the temperature in here up in the living room. So the living room is where we have our main temperature sensor. Here's our peppers. You just put a plastic bag over them. So it's a 5-gallon pail. We put peppers in the 5-gallon pail and just put a bag over them in the cooler here so they don't dry out. So that's kind of handy. Works good. These are our beets. Again, we store them the same way the peppers. Put them in a pail, make sure they're dry, and then put a plastic bag, a shopping bag over top, just to keep them from drying out too much. That works fine. This pail here is our apple discard pail. Again, you got to go through, check the boxes from time to time, pick the rotten ones out so it doesn't spread, and that seems to work pretty good. And so our carrots and our apples. See our apples again. Our carrots and our apples last right through the season, right through till the springtime, and so that's kind of neat. It's a real blessing, and hopefully this helps for help you store vegetables more effectively. This is how we store the sweet potato. They're in grape flats, which are okay, but the peach flats are much better, and I feel they're better because they provide more airflow as far as more space in between the flats. Here I had to cut and reduce the strength of the integrity of the box to get more airflow, whereas the peach flats there's already airflow there. And so stacked all these sweet potato in these boxes, and we tarped them and put a heater on. And so you're supposed to give them 80 degrees Fahrenheit for a couple weeks or something like that. I'm not sure the exact amount of time, but roughly a certain amount of time to just cure them up and make the sugars, make them sweeter. So that's how we store our sweet potato, and that's where they stay for the whole winter and right through the spring. The sweet potato are supposed to be cured at 80 degrees Fahrenheit for at least a week with high humidity. So yeah, tarping them in with a tarp and then putting a heater in there, and you adjust the heater until it's the right temperature. So what we did, we put a remote probe in with the boxes, and we were able to see what the temperature was with the temperature sensor, and we were able to read it in the living room, the temperature that the boxes were at. And so that's how we were able to just monitor and make sure they weren't too hot. And down below is our squash. I didn't get a lot of squash this year, but spaghetti squash. This is how we store them. Just pile them up, and you have to watch them because one can rot underneath the pile. So you just got to keep an eye once a week. Make sure, check out and make sure they're not rotting. And then here's our butternut squash and our pumpkins. So we just pile them up. Again, they'll last right through till spring, just like this. And now this is in our basement, so it's a little warm in the garage. Maybe 15. I'm switching back and forth between Fahrenheit and Celsius, but 15 degrees Celsius through the winter. These are our tomatoes. We just put them on the ping pong table in our work table. There's 2 tables there, and so we leave them here until they're ripe, and then so that when they're ready to can, then we take them off the table and can them. The cherry tomatoes, right now we just harvested these, and so they are in pails, but this is no way to keep cherry tomatoes. We actually put cherry tomatoes in baskets before, and that was no good because they're piled up and you can't find the rotten ones. So this year we switched to flats. So we've gone to flats, and we don't pile them up too deep. And so we were able to just see if there's any rotten ones. They just keep better, so they don't not squished. In pails and baskets they get squished, and so this seems to be the better way to keep them as far as in the flats, and they just are better eating that way. What happens in baskets and pails is that rotten ones, the juice goes down and gets over all the other tomatoes, and then there's a lot of tomatoes that taste bad then when you eat them, because that juice, the rotten juice, just you can't get it off the tomatoes, and so it spoils them. So in this situation where if one rots, it doesn't spread to a whole lot of tomatoes, and so you don't spoil the whole batch. And that's the neat thing with the flats. So grape flats again would work here. This is a peach flat here. Ones we use for the sweet potato. Well, we want to use it for the sweet potato next year, but the onions and the potatoes were put in the peach flats, and they seem to work really good. But grape flats will work fine for this as well, for the cherry tomatoes. Amongst all the tomatoes here, we have popcorn, and that is pretty neat. The popcorn really works cool, and it's super healthy, no pesticides, grown organically here, and it's a neat thing to try, that's for sure. The squash we have here, they last right through the spring. The majority of them last through the spring, but you do have to check once a week for any of them that have gone bad. So you'll have one go a week, squash, and so you got to use them up before the fruit flies get into them and start breeding and fill your whole house with fruit flies. But it's important to just check once a week for any of them that are bad. But the majority of them will last right through to spring. We just have them in the basement here, and it's not even that cool. So it's like 15 degrees Celsius. But yeah, it's important to check every week, or you'll have a fruit fly infestation.